But I do want to, in that spirit, go ahead and welcome Bill Torpy to our screen. And Bill, how are you? Of course, needing no introduction to us in Atlanta and even in the nation, but of course, you write about all things Metro Atlanta for the AJC. You joined the AJC in 1990. You're a native of Chicago. I spent a few years in Chicago myself. Actually, right as you were moving to Atlanta, I had just moved to Chicago. Love that city. But you write about the Metro column about politics, government, the police, the courts, the justice system, and in a way, I can't imagine a more adept person to talk about crime in our city today. So I know you'll guide us with a great discussion with Councilman Bond. And you're on mute, which is always fun to say in the Zoom world. There you go.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Now we got you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here. And they asked me to talk about an issue rather than my usual potpourri of all sorts of different stuff. And so the issue right now is crime. And in the city of Atlanta, in fact, we had an editorial over the weekend saying, solve the crime problem. This is the main issue. So anyways, and a lot of different things kind of are offshoots of this. In fact, the whole idea of Buckhead wanting to become its own city is an offshoot largely from this issue itself. And government's role has many things, but number one, I think, is to keep people safe. So that is right now, there's a feeling of people throughout the city, north, south, east, and west in the city, that they are feeling unsafe, even if all sorts of measures are happening to try to correct that. People are not seeing that. And murders this year are up 60% from last year. Ag assaults are up. Shooting incidents are up 41%. And in the past, the city had said, well, at least crime is down. Well, that's up too overall, 8% right now. So that is, I'm just kind of putting some of the issue into focus before I introduce our guest here, and that is Councilman Michael Julian Bond. He's been around a good long while. He's a native of Atlanta, obviously, the son of civil rights legend Julian Bond. And Councilman Bond has done two stints. One was 2 terms in the 90s, I think, till 2001. And then he came back in 2009, and he represents the city as a whole. So he gets calls from everywhere. And so he's a good person to talk to because he does have to think about constituents in all places. So anyways, I'd like to introduce Councilman Michael Julian Bond.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here at the Rotary, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, and so anyways, as I outlined, what we'll be talking about is crime in the city, and you have been at the forefront of talking about this in recent months. Just give me a little backdrop of what you are hearing from people. What are people calling you? As I said, you represent the city as a whole, so you got to be kind of all over the place talking with folks. And what is the vibe of what you're hearing right now?
Well, what I'm hearing really directly is that people do want relief. They want to see more police coverage in their communities. They are fearful, not only the violent crime, but some of the other issues around street racing, around all of these burglaries and small and petty crimes, particularly in the more densely populated areas of the city. As I move around to different neighborhoods and smaller business districts, they're inundated with a lot of petty crime. And a lot of repeat offenders. The city of Atlanta embarked upon a kindler, gentler bail reform program, which basically has resulted in a true revolving door at the municipal level. People want relief from it. They want accountability for the people who are making them the victims of crime. And, generally speaking, people are completely fearful. And it doesn't really matter what part of town that you're in. There has been a movement afoot to say that, oh, well, it's only the north side of town, or it's only Midtown or East Atlanta. But no, it's true. I'm getting feedback from every corner of Atlanta, Bankhead to Buckhead, East Lake to West Lake. I mean, there's not a part of town that hasn't been affected by this unprecedented crime wave that we're experiencing.
Mm-hmm. You said, I think when we talked earlier, I think last week, you were telling me that just people are losing patience. And how is that? How does that come about? What are people saying about that? Are they going to vote people out who are here? Or are they, going to move out of the city? Are they? What does losing patience? How does that affect itself?
Well, I think it can manifest itself in several ways. I mean, obviously, the ballot box is the institutionalized way to deal with individuals who you don't feel with whom you're getting service. But I think people are impatient. I think that this administration, and it's an honorable goal to try to be progressive and to have reforms around public safety. But I also think that they have been, in doing so, that they have kind of backed away from at least a strong public stance on public safety. And of course, not only do citizens, monitor what the police do, or what the mayor says, so do criminals, or those who are apt to try to take advantage of people, regardless of what the conditions in the community are. So if they hear and learn that Atlanta is either lax or is tamping down its police enforcement, then they see opportunity to come to the community and further victimize our citizens. I think our citizens are right to be frustrated because I'm in agreement with them that, I come from a civil rights background, obviously. I believe in police reform, and I think that we should reform our police. As a matter of fact, Atlanta is ahead of most cities that you might compare us to. During the Obama administration, the 8 can't wait. Atlanta was one of the leading citizens under the previous mayor to begin to enact those reforms. But what didn't happen then, that's happening now, is that there was never a public pronouncement that we were going to, I guess, back away from certain levels of enforcement. I'll give you a couple of examples. One, when it seemed that the car pursuits were becoming dangerous or might be a danger to the public, our police department said, hey, we're not going to chase anymore. Well, the result of that is that, car chases went up. In the retail industry, when our former police chief said, hey, we're not going to pursue shoplifting anymore. But that, even though that was a move to try to get some of the larger retailers to bolster their own security, the result is that shoplifting went up, and so people look for the cues. People who want to do wrong look for the cues, from our leadership to determine how they're going to conduct their own criminal activity. And so if we're perceived as being lackadaisical or not as concerned, they're going to take advantage. And that's what's been happening in Atlanta. And frankly, it doesn't matter what corner of the city, people
right.
see it. They can see the results of it.
What? Tell me about when we talked last week and at the public. You're on the public safety committee, so you obviously are in close contact with the police force. Tell the audience about what Chief Coit, Assistant Chief Coit, was talking about concerning car thefts in the city.
Well, he was telling us about the staggering amount of car thefts that take place in Atlanta. The majority of them are connected to these delivery services, people who are, I guess, operating, for Uber Eats or some of these other services that leave the keys and do the obvious things wrong. They leave the keys in the car, or, more so than that, leave the cars running. So people are apt to jump in, joyride, take the car. Over almost, I think it was 1,000, close to 1,000 car thefts in the city last year. Almost 80% were related to those types of activities. So, these are obvious things that people should not do that kind of fuel our crime rate. I was taught when I was 15, 16 years old, don't you ever leave the car unlocked. Don't you ever, to leave your keys in the car, or heaven forbid, leave it running. And it seems like we en masse have kind of, as a city, kind of forgotten some of those basic things. And so, that's fueled a lot of the car thefts. But related to the car thefts are the car break-ins. And so, there have been hundreds of guns stolen from cars within the city of Atlanta over the last calendar year. And this is extremely disturbing because, you've got individuals who are breaking into cars, they're leaving phones, leaving laptops, they're searching for guns because they know people are leaving their weapons, whether they're in a case or stuck in the glove box, in their vehicle. And so that has created a rash of crime. In my own Jeep a few years ago, I was the victim of this type of a crime. So the perception is if people aren't going to enforce these laws, if our citizens aren't going to be alert enough not to leave anything in the cars or on the seats or stored in their vehicles, then if you're going to do that, then you prevent an opportunity for an individual to obtain a gun or to commit a crime. And so, we got some disturbing statistics that, as you alluded to at the beginning of our presentation, that every category of crime is up in the city of Atlanta over the previous 2 years. And we're on track now to almost double it in some. I believe there's been over 200 shootings in Atlanta this year alone to this point. And we're only in the 5th month of the year.
Yeah, I think I didn't write it down, but I saw it was up 41%, but that's just this year. And last year kind of had really taken off. Let's talk about just kind of some of the perfect. We've been talking to police and criminologists here at the paper about what's going on. We keep hearing it's a cliche now, the perfect storm. I guess COVID got everybody first in their houses, and the thought was that crime would go down. It did in some places, like, for instance, home burglaries, because no one's burglarizing houses when people are there. But then things really started opening up a little bit in the last summer, and things have really kind of gone from there, whether it be nightclubs, street racing. There's a lot of people that are a little disaffected, unemployment, and people are just making bad decisions. In fact, the police department, I think, is having a press conference today at 2:30 about this. And one of the things they've been saying is, hey, people, make better decisions, which is, it's obviously, please don't commit crimes or, shoot at each other. But it's gotten to that point where they're actually saying that to folks. And then there's also kind of a disconnect. There's people that have lost a faith and confidence in the police department. And then at the same time, the police department have lost confidence in leadership. And in, that, as you were referring to, that the criminals that they arrest will stay in jail. Talk about all this. Obviously, I threw a lot on your lap right now, but the last thing about the confidence in police and the confidence the police have that their jobs, it kind of runs both ways, that their jobs will be done and they'll get back up.
Well, in an ideal world, policing is a marriage between those who have the responsibility to enforce the law and those of whom they're sworn to protect. The police, in many instances, over years and decades, have always maintained that they're only as effective as their relationship with the community, and it is a two-way relationship. Last year when we were facing this unprecedented pandemic and the conditions that resulted from it, I would be in full agreement that our community was dealing with all types of issues and frustrations, of course, that no one ever anticipated it, and that had a societal effect on people's behavior, usually, a negative effect. And then we had the broader issues around the nation with so many police shootings and incidences where we had so many deaths and so many high profile cases. There was also an overlay on the way people perceive not just policing here in Atlanta, but policing around the country. And so, when people say, well, this is a result of COVID, or circumstances, I would agree with that only to a point. But we're in a new year now. We've got a vaccine. Our society is opening up, and our statistics are still going in the wrong direction. And so it is a combination of whether or not you're going to be progressive in your reforms to the point that it misinforms those who would take advantage to believe that Atlanta is wide open, that we are a relaxed city, that you can come to Atlanta and basically do anything. And I'll give you an example. You mentioned the street racing. Almost every incident of street racing where there were arrests and busts of those events in our city, our police found that the organizers and many of the participants weren't even residents of Atlanta or even Georgia. They were people who were coming to Atlanta to participate in these events and basically break the law here. A lot of the shootings that took place at the nightclubs and bar scene in Atlanta were also individuals who were not from Atlanta. They were not from here. Now, that's not to minimize those unfortunate incidences that happened in our city, where there were people who were, residents that got involved in these aggravated assaults and even some murders. But a large percentage of people have been coming here to commit their lawless activity. You couple that with the overlay of the shadow that's been cast upon the profession of policing, those who embarked upon that vocation here in Atlanta, after the unfortunate incident in Southeast Atlanta, where the young man lost his life in an incident, the way that was handled, not necessarily by the city's rule book in dealing with the two gentlemen who were involved in the shooting, but even the incident that happened during the demonstrations prior to that with the college students. The city didn't follow its own procedures that we've asked police officers to adhere to and to believe in. And a couple of those officers involved in that have gotten their jobs back. And it's an open question as to whether or not in the Rayshard Brooks case that one of those officers may be reinstated because the city didn't follow its own rules. And I point that out to say that in these trying times, it becomes more important for the city to follow its rules with its employees, in this case, the police department, but also not just for the community to hold the police to a higher standard, but we've got to hold ourselves to a higher standard, understanding that our employees are working in this difficult environment. So they have to know that they have our moral support in these challenging times, despite everything else that's going on. And that's been the case over the last year.
Yeah, thank you. Speaking of what you're just referring to, the last summer and the Rayshard Brooks shooting, the next day, Erica Shields left And it's still been a little bit uncertain as to, how, if she was forced out or if she kind of fell on her sword. The city has a interim chief in the meantime. And Erica Shields was kind of a good mixture of experienced cop, tough on crime, yet progressive. In fact, after she left, I wrote an article saying that, we're going to need to find a chief. And I mentioned several of the attributes. And I said, someone like Erica Shields. One of our questions I've seen already is that, when will there be a permanent chief put into the job? I know that the city's been saying it's hard. There's, a lot of cities are trying to get new chiefs. And, everybody wants someone who's a paragon of virtue and smart and computer oriented and tough on crime, yet empathetic. And apparently there's not enough of those people to go around. What are you hearing as far as this? I know you don't pick the chief, but what are you hearing concerning this?
Well, unfortunately, not much at all. We are very concerned that even though we do have confidence in the interim chief, Rodney Bryant, because of his with APD, I think you're right. I think when I talk to the rank and file officers, they would like a permanent leader. They would like to know who is going to be leading them during these difficult times. And as time goes on, as we get closer to an election, election year, a year ago when he assumed the duties, up until now, it would almost be, I wouldn't say impossible, but extremely difficult to attract someone when, of course, the mayor is up. The mayor and council are up for election. And of course, our mayor has some strong challengers. And so, that becomes a difficult proposition for someone to entertain, not knowing, what the situation with their boss is going to be, in the late fall. And so, with those issues of leadership, they're permeating, the morale of the department. These young men and women who are our police officers are being asked to do a difficult job on the best day, under the best circumstances. And you throw in all of the issues that have happened over the last, 18 months plus, so they have to know that those at City Hall are firmly behind them and what you're doing. I think you saw some of that last year when there was a push during our budget hearings to quote unquote defund the police. And of course, that effort was rejected. And I just want to say for the record, when I was questioned by, some activists who, questioned my, African-American card, or civil rights credibility, you say, I've never been to a community meeting ever where people said they did not want more police or better policing. So, we rejected that. At the same time, that was also the same meeting that we confirmed the raises and salary and benefits for our police. And we phased it in over 3 years, and we confirmed that. But, that's not enough. These folks are basically risking their lives more so now than ever, given the climate in the country. They have to know that we have, their back on the performance of their jobs. And of course, from the community standpoint, I want to point out, community folks need to know how much progress the Atlanta Police Department has actually made in reforming its police efforts over the last 9 years. I know we've been ahead of other departments. People have to understand that, but they're not going to understand that until there's greater communication and relationship between, the rank and file, the leadership, and our community to know, what type of services they're actually receiving from APD. And APD needs to know what are the real issues that they want community folks want them to focus on. And so, there has to be a more robust response from the leadership at City Hall, myself included, to make sure that we're doing that. and so that we're paying attention to what our constituents are asking us to achieve on their behalf.
Right. A couple things. You talked about the vote last summer about defunding the police. It wasn't, I guess it was holding off funding towards the end of the year to make sure that, it was kind of a carrot and stick, that the police wouldn't get this extra funds if they didn't do these reforms. It was defeated 8-7. And interestingly, it was the majority of the Black council people voted in the 8. So it was talk a little bit about, and one other thing we were talking about the other day after the meeting, there was a lot of people calling in. Now at the Zoom city council meetings, you have a zillion calls coming in, right? Because like anyone can call in now. You can just call in. Before you had to schlep yourself down to city council and sign in and stand up and talk to the city council. Now you just make a telephone call, talk for 2 minutes. And interestingly, I was noticing that I start hearing the voice, and if they were kind of younger and white, they were saying close the jail. And if they were older and African American, I was even just noticing, you would then hear people saying, I want you to keep the jail open. I want, to keep the city safe. Talk about that, the vote that we were talking about, the 8-7 vote, and just what I was just talking about, the people calling in, about closing the jail and keeping it open.
Well, I think what you're seeing is the progression of newer, younger activists coming on the scene, trying to address the longstanding issues of, over policing and over criminalization of our criminal justice system. But what a lot of these young activists miss is that what leads to longer incarceration for individuals, usually it doesn't occur at the municipal level at all. It occurs at the with the prosecutor's level or the district attorney level when they're bargaining or trying to develop the actual charges that they're pursuing in the trial. With older individuals here, calling in from around these neighborhoods, these are people who've lived in the community a long time, who've suffered, from crime, in the community. They've seen their neighborhoods change over the years. They've experienced, the downside of a lack of effective policing. I mean, you want to go back 70 years to the late 1940s when we had to push to hire the first African-American police officers in Atlanta. Part of that push wasn't just to integrate. It was because there was a lack of policing in the Black community by the majority white staff at APD. And so the crime rate in the Black community was high, and they felt that if they had African-American police officers in their community, they would care more about policing the neighborhoods. And so that dynamic essentially really hasn't changed. And so you're seeing kind of the generational grinding of perspective between young people who have grown up under, the 3 strikes and you're out, the Clinton crime bill, and they've seen the effects of that, and they don't want any more of that in their neighborhoods. But that's versus people longer in the tooth individuals who've lived in communities that have had to deal with the societal issues around crime. Now, I know that was a long answer, but I'm going to close it out by saying when you get around the issue around whether or not to defund the police, one, I was really surprised by the lack of understanding of our colleagues about what city council is about, okay? The Atlanta City Council is the legislative body of the city. We set the policy that the mayor follows and the laws that everybody follows. We don't have to negotiate with the police department. We don't have to set a term to say, hey, we're going to cut half your budget unless you do X, Y, and Z. As a legislative body, we simply could just set the policy and tell the police, you will do X, Y, and Z, then A, B, and C. And it's literally the law of the land. And so that was a bad assumption made by those who supported the defunding of the police just on its face. And then secondly, the proposed legislation was also illegal. You can't take half of the salary and benefits of an individual under Georgia law and hold it in escrow or hold it hostage, and put conditions on it. And then thirdly, again, as I mentioned earlier, I've never been to a community meeting, and it doesn't matter where it is, whether it's on the northern side of the city or the southernmost, most crime-ridden areas of town or the most affluent, where anybody has ever said to me that they wanted less police in their neighborhood. And I think you saw the members that did support that, deal with the reality that even though what happened to Mr. Brooks was tragic, probably should not have happened under any circumstances, that he lost his life because he was, inebriated and half asleep in a Wendy's parking lot. That should not have happened. But even though that did happen, 911 is ringing right now. People are calling for police services at this very moment, and they will be when we're off the call. So there's a huge demand and need for that service in our city, hence our conversation. And so we have to learn how to do it better. We have to learn how to respond to all of the different perspectives that we get addressed with. But at the end of the day, people want their issues responded to. They want a response for from the taxes that they pay for the services that they're supposed to be receiving. And what we're seeing, what you saw last year, is an acknowledgement of that in that vote.
Right. One of the audience members is asking a question that is actually, I was going to kind of morph to this anyway, so it's a good break here. The question is, what are some of the recommendations from Councilman Bond or Torpy to curb the issues we're currently having with crime? Let me frame that a little bit. Just, in fact, last week, there was one of the problems is nightclubs. There's a lot of pop-up nightclubs, it seems, or restaurants, or nightclubs that are pretending to be restaurants. And there was an audit last week that really was kind of harsh on the city. The department, the police department is the one that has police that audit nightclubs to see if they're really behaving themselves. And the audit said that they just aren't. They don't have enough people doing that, which is a thing. And there's a couple other things I'll bring up right now, and we'll then talk about the jail, which is the hot issue right now. And you're in the middle. You're right in the thick of that. There's effort to hire more cops, which is that's kind of the the 2,000 cop goal. And this like the movie Groundhog Day, right? We've had this ever since Bill Campbell was mayor. This has just been going around and around. And then you guys also did a bonus for police. I think it was $2,500 maybe to retain them. We're losing in the city of Atlanta veteran cops that are in the sweet spot. 5 to 8 years. They know the city. They know their job. They're still young and energetic, and then they go to Brookhaven or somewhere else for more money. Anyways, there's a lot of different things, about how do you, what are some of the solutions? I've thrown some of those up here. Talk about some of those, hiring more cops. And one other thing is with the street racing, it was your ordinance that you passed to not allow them to be bailed out with the no cash bond unless they go to a judge first. Is that, am I remembering that right?
Right. They have to have what's called an arraignment hearing before they're allowed to sign their own bond. They could still sign their own bond. We wanted to be clear about that. But they have to see a judge so the judge can review the charges, they can determine, because street racing could apply to someone being late for work. And then, of course, is or the negative behavior that we're generally speaking of here. And so we wanted to make sure that there was a judge that would review the charges to make that type of distinction. because we had a chronic individual who was street racing and, of course, endangering the public. You don't necessarily want to allow them the privilege of signing their own bond if they're going to get right back out and do it again, which is what prompted it, that people were basically being allowed to sign themselves out, and they were returning to the activity that they had just been arrested for.
Right.
But to kind of touch on the issue that you raised, and there were a few, but I'll try to get to them as quickly as I can. We did do the street racing amendment to our bail reform law. I was very successful about a month ago creating a panel made up of our criminal justice partners on the city level to review the bail reform law. And I put the people on there that should have been on there in the first place in 2018 when we passed the current version. We have the courts involved, our solicitor's office, and our police and corrections folks that will be revising the policy. In the push to do bail reform in 2018, we basically eliminated the infrastructure that activists demanded or said that we needed to make bail reform work. Most people don't realize that the city of Atlanta has had a signature bond program for like 35 years, but it was run by the court. And so when the mayor's proposal went forward in 2018, it eliminated all of those employees and that infrastructure. These are people who would interview the folks who were seeking to sign their own bond, get in their contact information, and would follow up with them to make sure that they showed up in court. What we passed in 2018 wiped all that out. And so we've impaneled a group largely underneath the supervision of the court to see about how to fix it. And they're supposed to report back to the Public Safety Committee in 30 days.
Okay.
We also reenacted the ATAG task force, the Alcohol Technical Advisory Group. They will be meeting around this issue of these restaurants that morph into clubs and bars and whatnot. We've just finished making the appointments at the last council meeting. And so we'll be impaneling that group. They've got a 90-day turnaround to bring us back some recommendations. And of course, you mentioned that scathing audit. And this is where it gets into having an interim chief. The chief admitted that he was not aware of how poorly that group was staffed. Even though they've had complaints about this issue, going back at least 2 years. And so, that just underscores why we need permanent leadership, at the chief's level within APD, because if they could miss something glaring, like this, despite getting complaints about it, literally at probably every community meeting that APD representatives are attending, then what other gaps, are there?
Yeah, it's good to have new eyes, it seems. To have that. I see our time is running late, and I wanted to get to the jail because that's been an important thing, and you're in the middle of that one. The city has a jail that's been around for decades. It has 1,300 beds. Right now, it was originally keeping people who were arrested in Atlanta before they went to Fulton County. And years ago, that was changed, and then it became for people violating city codes. Now, I think there's only 30 people in being kept in a jail built for 1,300, something of that nature. And one of the things that you've been saying, the Fulton County Jail is, where people with felonies are being held. They have overcrowding. It's just been going on and on and on. And your proposal is to use the city jail to help as a kind of a relief valve for the county jail. And then you wouldn't have to release people as quickly and as willy-nilly as often what happens. Talk a little bit about that. There's the effort by the administration has been to close the jail, to turn it into an equity center that you would have, learning and social services and all things like that. And it all sounds great, but the place was built as a jail. It's physically a jail. In fact, you used to work there, as I remember, as a guard, right?
Previous.
The previous jail. Okay. But anyway, you want to talk with the county wants to rent out at least, or maybe get the keys to it to use it, and it seems like a sensible thing. I've written about that. I've talked to you about that. Talk about what should happen there with the city jail.
Well, thank you for the question. Yeah, I worked at the previous jail, which is now the existing Gateway Center, and we'd have to start the conversation there because when Fulton County opened their jail 35 years ago, it was at capacity when they opened it. The city of Atlanta opened what is now the Gateway Center, the then pretrial detention center, in 1980, and they worked out a deal. Michael Lomax and Maynard Jackson worked out a deal to help Fulton County with its overcrowding. This was a step toward combining the criminal justice system within Atlanta and Fulton County. Atlanta would take all the arrestees within Atlanta, felony or municipal. They would provide them a first appearance hearing in our courts. And then that acts bond hearing. So they would divert people via bond, out of the pipeline to go to the Fulton County Jail. That agreement was broken in the early 2000s. And then the population, for dubious reasons, and then the population of the Fulton County Jail exploded because Atlanta was only taking in municipal detainees. Now, the ACDC was built in the spirit of governmental cooperation. I mean, when I worked at the previous jail, it was built for 400 people, and we had an average daily population of 1,600. If you can imagine it, the conditions that existed at Fulton County Jail now were like the conditions I worked in at what is now the Gateway Center. And so when ACDC was built, the U.S. Marshals and some other governmental agencies needed a place to hold their detainees to go to the federal court, which is right down the block. And so Atlanta got a contract with the Marshals and used that contract to pay for the construction of ACDC. And so when Mayor Bottoms ended the contract with ICE, he also ended the contract with the U.S. Marshals. That resulted in our jail being empty. But the situation in Fulton County remains unchanged. And so on any given day, 40 to sometimes 80% of the inmates that are there as a result of cases that originate out of the city of Atlanta. Our police are taking the felonies over to Atlanta. In this crime wave, those are more than likely state and federal charges. They're going to go to the Fulton County Jail, contributing to the overpopulation. And if they're charged with the 7 deadly sins, rape, murder, aggravated assault, etc., they can't qualify to be early released, under some of these COVID restrictions. So I think we play a role in contributing to the situation at the Fulton County Jail. And I think that since we have a building that is chronically empty and built as a jail, and of course the mayor's efforts, even her most ardent supporters say it would cost $125 million to turn that jail into anything else. I mean, that to me is not something that I've ever supported, and I think it's wholly impractical. Of course, the mayor took a great stand on the ICE inmates on the border, and that was part of her emphasis for cutting the ICE contract. Well, we have worse conditions, that's 3,500 miles away. We have worse conditions 2 miles away over on Wright Street. And I think that we're morally obligated to do something about it. We have a paper that's coming up early in the council meeting today. In fact, I put in a paper to create a joint committee between the city and the county, the sheriff, the judges, the commissioners, to sit down and see how we can use that facility and work this out and save taxpayers money. 90% of Atlanta is in Fulton County. Atlanta makes up almost 2/3 of Fulton County. Why shouldn't we work this out? Why shouldn't we sit down?
You were kind of getting pushback from the administration at the last public safety committee last week when you were trying to ask the CFO questions. I think you asked the same question 4 times.
Yeah.
And it was like you were trying to put your thumb on Jell-O. You weren't getting a pretty straight answer. I think that the administration is locked into the idea of closing the jail, and there are people on the city council who have the opposite opinion right now.
I think that's fair to say, and they have had some communication with the county, but of course, if their heart is in another vein, they're not going to, or they haven't at this point seemed to want to try to compromise on the issue. That's why we're pushing to have a committee so that we can sit down with these governments. You know, we serve the same people, and we're taxing the same people, and people expect us to work together to work on what are regional issues. You know, criminals don't recognize political boundaries and jurisdictions. You know, when they're committing crimes and creating mayhem in our society,
Mm-hmm.
we need to work cooperatively to address these things, and that's what our push today is going to be about. And you know, and just like in our last meeting, I was told we've got over 500 public comments around this issue
Today.
You know,
Oh, good God.
So you know, it's going to be another lengthy day. I mean, we were at the public safety meeting last week till 10 p.m.
Yeah. Here's a question that pops in. I know you got to be going to a meeting here in a few minutes at 1:00, I think. What is your opinion about forming the Buckhead city?
Well, I think that is a symptom of a lack of attention to that community from the administration. And I think if the administration were to sit down and begin a dialogue with those community leaders and those citizens, that a lot of that would go away. It would be extremely costly to those residents and to the city of Atlanta for any part of the city of Atlanta to leave. And I don't think it, you know, on its face, it's not financially worth it, but I think that they would not be having that conversation if they had been getting the kind of responsiveness that we all expect from our government. And I would hope, you know, I'm more than willing to sit down with those individuals who are feeling that way. But ultimately, it's got to come from the administration. And I think it's frustration. They're able to better articulate their frustration with the current state of affairs with this administration, perhaps in some other areas of town, because the kind of conversations that they're having, the kind of things that they're saying are their issues, I've heard, you know, everywhere. And so, but I do think that what really at the core of it is a relationship with the government that they support through taxes, and making sure that that government is responsive to them in an effective way. And I think if this administration and council addresses their issues, then, you know, there's no reason to have that conversation.
Right. Okay. Very, very good. I see from some of our people offline, they're telling us to wrap it up here. Is there anything else? Well, how you doing, Cannon?
Well, no, rich, authoritative discussion. Thank you both. I mean, that is just, and you've opened up a series of questions, Councilman Bond. I think, you know, we could continue on for another hour. I know the city council's meeting at 1:00, and you do need to dial in for that. So I do have one or two questions, but why don't I'll let you go ahead and go if you'd like, and Bill, you and I can just wrap up if it works that way.
What time is it?
It is about 4 till 1.
Okay, I've got 3 minutes.
Oh, excellent. All right, well, good. Well, so in that spirit, I mean, quickly, you know, I think, you know, Bill, you alluded to the perfect storm. And in this conversation, I think you've highlighted how we've moved kind of the next chapter. It is no longer just about COVID. I mean, certainly that had an impact, but it's more than that. First question is, I mean, are we in a little bit of a limbo period until a police chief can be recruited? And is there any way that can happen before the mayoral election? So are we in kind of a permanent limbo before anything meaningful can happen?
Well, you know, it's the responsibility of the administration to hire the police chief. We just confirmed the police chief. So I would say, yes, we probably are in a state of limbo unless they decide to act. Now, the city council could direct the mayor or the administration through ordinance to do so. But then, you know, I don't know if we wanted to do that because, again, the type of individual that we want is not someone who's willing to take a job just for a few months if the election doesn't go the mayor's way. You know, you want to make prior to this situation is that the Atlanta Police Foundation, working with former Chief George Turner in developing the management of APD, making sure that they were moving individuals around, getting them trained in all aspects of policing and management, not just letting somebody stay in a position for umpteenth years, but they were really moving and developing a strong, bench of leadership at APD. I don't know what happened to that after Chief Shields left. I think we probably do need to sit down with, our interior and exterior partners and say, hey, how can we resolve the issues of leadership at APD? Not casting any aspersions on, our acting chief, Rodney Bryant. I mean, we started in public safety at the same time, way back in 1989. He was driving the paddy wagon and I was at the back door of the jail receiving arrestees. But something does have to change because it's obvious that there are issues there.
Well, thank you. I know you're thinking about it every day and you're taking calls and emails every day. And I know 1 o'clock you'll continue your work there. So Councilman Bond, thank you for your leadership and thank you for joining us today.
All right. Thank you. And I apologize that I have to leave so quickly, but I've really enjoyed it. And, I would love to come back at any time. I'm at your disposal.
Great. Well, thank you. We will have you back. So we appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman.
It's good, Torpy. Good to see you in face to face.
Right. Good. We'll see you soon. Soon enough, I think, when the world starts opening up again.
All right. You all have a great.
All right. Thank you. And Bill, we can just wrap up too quickly, but thank you. It's such a great conversation that you organized. I mean, clearly, you're thinking a lot about it. Maybe we are in limbo for a little bit, which is a little bit of a challenge. I mean, there's some key things from culture to, local community, stronger presence to maybe more officers hired to more surveillance equipment, more cameras. But without leadership secured, it sounds like things are a little bit in limbo. Just curious as we wrap, maybe just one question, there are other major issues too that need to ultimately be in place, improve literacy, in the public school system, mental health issues, that the population's dealing with, building economic opportunity, particularly for younger adults, all those things are important too. So there's no one silver bullet. But as you wrap this conversation, what are your takeaways from this?
Well, I mean, you said a lot of different things, and books have been written about any one of each of those issues. It's just going to take hard work. I mean, those who have quick solutions to these types of things are just kidding themselves and often just kidding or misleading other people. It's a lot of hard work. It's not just hiring more police, not giving just bonuses. It's not, getting more capacity for the jail. And then there's all the other types of things. The COVID created a lot of empty space, kind of the safety net for social services and jails and youth sports. Kids aren't going to the YMCAs and all that. So there was just all sorts of different things. And all of those need to be fixed, addressed, of course, education and jobs. And, where do you start with this? You got another 24 hours, we can talk about it.
Well, exactly. No, it's not, as you said, no one simple solution, and books have been written. But I know you'll keep writing too, and you'll keep informing us with your great insights and columns. So thank you for organizing our discussion today. And I hope we can, as a group, as a club, and alongside you, keep our conversations going to figure out how we can ultimately address, this major challenge. So, cool. Bill, thank you very much for your time today.
Sure. I appreciate you guys having me, and good luck. We'll talk again, I'm sure.
And we absolutely will. So thank you.